Well, good morning, church. For those of y'all who are visiting or don't know me, my name is Lucas Pinkert. I'm the pastor here. And this morning, as it is our fifth Sunday, we're going to, after service, have a time of lunch and fellowship. But today, I wanted, as we wrap up our year, to have a person who's been very impactful in our church and our community share their testimony with you. Now, many of you may not have seen this person around. Her name is Kristy Bleau. You may not have seen her at church. You may be wondering, why is this person that we haven't seen at church, why are they coming up and sharing their testimony? I'm here every Sunday. Well, two reasons. First off is because you won't. And the second is, Jason's like, oh, mirror. So, and the second is because Kristy lives a life that exemplifies service. And oftentimes the reason that she's not here is because she is working overnights as a 911 operator in the city of Grapevine, making sure that people have the help that they need throughout the most difficult points of their life, day in and day out. If that weren't enough, when Kristy first moved back to Lake Dallas, and I'm sure she'll share this as part of her story, she tried to find ways that she could serve in our community, and has started an organization called Lake City's Hope, which helps those in need who are going through the worst periods in their life here in Lake Dallas and then Shady Shores and Corinth and Hickory Creek, to make sure that they are able to have the help week in and week out that they need in order to make ends meet. On top of that, Kristy has not just been one of the most faithful members of our community. If her service wasn't enough as a 911 operator and starting Lake City's Hope, which really became an organization because all of the other nonprofits in our community began to fail, or people got tired of it, or it was too much work, and yet this one person took all of it on herself to do that. If all of that weren't enough, Kristy looked at our community and said, you know what, the thing that we really need is we need people who are strong believers that are part of our city government. And she, a couple of years ago, became a council member. There are a lot of people who tell me, hey, I don't know how you do everything that you do in a week with kids and a family. And it is people like Kristy Bleau that I look at and I'm like, hey, listen, I had a nap this week, so Kristy didn't get any of that. And it keep me motivated to continue on. So I'm very honored not just to be her pastor, but to introduce to you my friend and an awesome member of our community, Miss Kristy Bleau, who'll be sharing her testimony this morning.
Good morning. After that, I'm a little afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed. But thank you. I am Kristy, and I have lived in Lake Dallas for going on 7 years. It'll be 7 years in February this time around. I actually lived in Lake Dallas in about 2012 for 2 years. It was the longest 2 years of my life. I hated it. I said I would never come back, not even for a visit. And here I am. God brought me back. So it's an absolute treat to be here this morning. I first must apologize that I'm not a public speaker by any means. And frankly, I just don't think my story is that interesting. But when Pastor Lucas asked me to come and share about Lake City's Hope and what I do, I happily agreed. And then he kind of added the whole testimony part after the fact. So had that been in the beginning, I don't know that I would be here this morning. But that's okay. Some of you know me and some of you don't, so I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. But I was a member of First Baptist Church Lake Dallas in 2012. I come from California. Sorry, don't judge. But that's where I was born and raised. My church in California, I went to Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, which is a very large church. We had about 45,000 members in the church. The pastor was Rick Warren. He's written books all over. We had 19 campuses worldwide. And so to come to First Baptist Church Lake Dallas, it was different, to say the least. In fact, the first time I drove by several times thinking that maybe the church was closed. I didn't realize that the church was actually open. My daughter did middle school out here, and she was basically the youth group. The pastor at the time, and I cannot remember his name, but it was the pastor, I think, before Ben. He was a young guy, and he and his wife would actually take my daughter back into the pastor's office and do a little Bible study so I could go to the adult Bible study. And so that's kind of my circle to be back here. In California, I have suffered debilitating depression most of my life. I can remember being depressed and young and just hating myself and hating life since I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I wasn't medicated until later in life, but I didn't have any friends really, and like school was a struggle because I just never really fit in or found my place. Let me get back. So I was debilitating depression. I had my daughter in 1997, and I missed most of her childhood because of my depression. I don't remember most of it at all. And it wasn't the depression that you get after pregnancy. It was true depression. I was on up to 6 antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds at one time through a big portion of my life. I was saved at probably 11 or 12 because I did grow up in the church, but I didn't grow up in a church because my family was really involved. I grew up in a church because the church bus would pick us up on Sunday morning and allow my dad to watch the football game. And so the church bus would pick us up. We would be all ready. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. And they would take us to a church service, and they'd bring us home a couple hours later. So that was my real involvement with church. It was never a family church. I was baptized at 13 at church camp. And I always knew that I loved God and I needed to do the right thing, but I didn't really understand it. I would leave the church and I'd come back. I got married in the church. It was actually First Baptist Church of Yorba Linda. And then the pastor went to prison. So that was fun. So it kind of strays you, and you just don't really understand your purpose. I lived, like I said, in Lake Dallas in about 2012, I believe. Again, we hated it. It started out okay, but I came out here without a big plan. My brother lives in Shady Shores. He said, "You want to move to Lake Dallas?" I'm like, "Okay, I don't have anything going on in California. So what difference does it make? We'll move." Caitlin was for it, but we went through a lot. I've been divorced for 25 years. And while I was out here, I met a man, and I thought I could help save him because that's what I do is I save people. And he ended up totaling my car and trying to kill me. And so we went back home. And it was right around a time, if you guys have been here a long time, there were several teenage suicides. There was 1 teenage suicide and then it was a messy time. So it was time for us to go back home. So I put my tail between my legs and I said, I failed. I'm going back home. I lost my insurance and I went off of my meds cold turkey. And that was 6 antidepressant meds. That's not a very smart thing apparently to do. I find out after the fact. They said that I probably should have either died or had really, really bad withdrawals. And I had neither. But the reason I had neither was because that's when my eyes were open to the homeless community and a community of recent parolees. So I was invited to a homeless church, and I got really involved in that. So what I found was that instead of needing antidepressants to curb my depression, I could be a service to others. And so people thank me for serving the community, but really I do it for selfish reasons. And that's because it makes me feel healthy and it makes me feel whole and it makes me feel complete. And I don't need medication. I'm happy to say I've been off of any meds, which I guess may or may not be good, but I'm off any meds for probably about 12 years, minus my ADHD meds. And those you don't want me to go off of. You know. So anyway, so that's a little bit about my story. I got really involved in the homeless community in California. I was kind of branded. I would drive, they called it the Jesus bus. It was a spray-painted bus in, I don't know if any of you guys know California at all, but Santa Ana. It's a really big highly Hispanic, highly gang populated, one of the biggest homeless communities in probably the nation, besides Skid Row. And I was branded there. I would go into the encampments, and they knew me. They didn't know me because I would give them anything. They knew me because I would build relationships with them. I wouldn't give them money, but I might take them out to dinner, and we would sit and we'd have a meal together. So I drove the homeless van for a long time, and what that would do is I would go and pick up homeless people, like street homeless, and we would bring them to a local brick and mortar church, not Saddleback. That would have never flown at Saddleback Church. But we would take them to a brick and mortar church, and they would sit with me. The most giving, heartfelt moment I ever had, not really giving for me, but giving for them, was when I sat next to somebody named Vicky. She had worn the same pair of socks for 17 days and had not showered. And the offering plate went by, and she took all of her change out of her pocket and she put it in there. It's probably only 50 cents, but it made me realize the importance of getting somebody to church and having that community feeling. And so that just, I still remember Vicky. I don't talk to her. But on my Facebook, you'll actually find somebody actually posted this morning that we've been Facebook friends for 7 years, and he was somebody that I met on the streets. He had just recently been released from parole, and I accepted him where he was. So fast forward a couple years to 2017, and I decided that I wanted to do more. The homeless community wasn't enough. So I prayed. God doesn't talk to me like I want him to. I want Kristy do A, Kristy then do B, and Kristy, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get A plus B equals C. Apparently, that's not the way God talks. So I prayed, and I said, God, use me in a way that you feel fit, but give me more. So he woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which apparently is the time to talk to God. And with absolute certainty, he said, you're going to Africa. You're going to Ghana. And I was like, God, I don't even know where Ghana is. I am very content with my little homeless community and my little white picket fence lifestyle that I have. I'm not a missionary. I don't read the Bible like I'm supposed to. I obviously don't attend church like I'm supposed to, since most of you had no idea. I've been members for 7 years here. And I can't quote Bible stories or anything like that. I'm not a missionary. So I met with the team leader, and I explained all of my deficiencies. And I said, the only skill set that I have, and I don't even claim to be very smart sometimes, but I can love people where they're at. And my relationship I developed with the homeless community and parolees was one like most people couldn't do. I was a hospice volunteer for pediatric cancer patients, so I would sit with kids that were dying. I find a way to sit with the people that nobody else wants to sit with. And she said, Kristy, that's really the only skill set anybody needs. You don't have to be able to build houses or clean water or anything like that. So that being said, I committed to going to Ghana, West Africa, which is hard for me because I'm a realist. I knew that I had to raise $4,000, and I was a single mom. I couldn't give $4,000. So one night I prayed again. I said, God, this is the stupidest thing you have ever done in your entire life. Why would I commit to committing $4,000? I don't have that. I'm not going to Africa. That's just unheard of for somebody like me. And I was about 40% funded at that time. By the time I woke up, God's like, joke's on you. You are going to Africa because you're now 100% funded. So in the matter of the period that I was sleeping, which I don't sleep very much, but those few hours, somehow I was funded to the $4,000, and I was indeed going to Africa. And that was my only out. Like, I had no way, I had no excuse now. So I went, and it completely changed my life. Everything on that trip was completely God orchestrated. I have no doubt at all. We went to remote villages where people did not speak English. They spoke Ga. or Doug Bonney, and we did church planting with one of our partner churches there, which is an Assemblies of God church. And we would show their members how to talk to people and ask them, why don't you go to church? What can the church do differently to bring you in? Is it a language barrier? Is it because you don't feel comfortable? Like, what is it? And we were able to do the survey, and I'm happy to say that the church that we worked with did plant a church in that remote village. And so that was definitely God. We did a conference for pastors. We had 40 pastors from all over Ghana fly in, and they had concerns about their church growth and the things like, what can we do to make church better? And they were like, no-brainers. Like, we asked them, what are your biggest problems? And they're like, illiteracy. Okay, well, do you have anybody that can read in your service or in your church? And they're like, well, yeah, we'll start a mentorship. Like, it wasn't hard stuff, but it was stuff that was beyond the scope of what they're used to, because they're dealing with so many other things that we don't hear. We also went to a witch camp. There's 6 of them worldwide, and they're all located in Ghana. And basically what a witch camp is when women are accused of witchcraft, which doesn't actually mean they're an active witch, but they could have had an affair with your husband. So now I'm going to accuse you of being a witch. You're going to be exiled to this community, and you're going to be sent to die. Or I could have had a dream about you, so that meant you got into my brain, which means that you're active in witch camp, so I could make that accusation. And there was really no way to get out of the accusation except a chicken sacrifice, but that's a whole nother thing. I was afraid to go to the witch camp. I was terrified because witches, I mean, really, who wants to get a spell on put on them? You know, I was terrified. Our flight got canceled, and I was like, that is God. That is absolutely 100% God. Well, guess what? Joke's on you, Kristy. We just found you a cheaper flight. So we got a cheaper flight in a little prop plane in Africa, which was terrifying to say the least. And we went up to northern Ghana, and we visited the witch camp. We were there overnight, not in the camp overnight, but we stayed in a hotel outside of the camp. And we could only be in the camp for about 4 hours because of the time it took to get there and travel away. You had to leave the camp before sundown because, for lack of better description, they were pirates. You know how they attack like ships in the sea? There were basically pirates on the road going to and from the witch camp, and they would attack the cars. So we had to leave. We did have an escort, but it was profound. It's these women, they loved God. They had no idea what we were saying because they spoke Doug Bonney. But we brought them Bibles in their language, and most of them were Muslim. But they accepted us. They sang to us. They were most colorful, amazing women I had ever met. And to know that people live in a different kind of poverty than I was dealing with the homeless community, it was out of the realm that I could even honestly comprehend at that time, because I grew up in an upper middle class area. Even in Lake Dallas, you know, I'm helping people in need all the time, and we'll talk about that too. But there's no extreme poverty here like there is in a third world country. So it opened my eyes. And these women were amazing, and this trip changed my life completely. I've since been back one additional time in 2022. And on that trip, we were actually able to take 4 young adults that were members of our church, our home church there, on their very first mission trip. So it was a mission within a mission. And we took these women to we took these kids to this witch camp where they could actually witness it outside of textbooks. So it's kind of like the witch camps are so far removed that you just don't understand them. even living in Ghana, like, because who does that? I mean, it's just so far removed. So to be able to take 4 young adults on their very first airplane trip in a prop plane in Africa, it was amazing, and to see these Ghanaian people welcome these witches that they had read about in textbooks was profound. Um, so when I got back to California, I decided that God had changed my heart. I love the homeless community and I love the Pearlies, but God had changed my heart. I worked in social services at the time, and when people would come in to get food stamp benefits, all I could see was them sitting in an air-conditioned office, knowing that they could go get food anywhere in Orange County at a soup kitchen, but they were there arguing with me about the money that they weren't making. And I understand, I don't try not to judge, but he really did. He shifted my heart. And my brother called me. Well, he actually called my daughter because he hadn't talked to me since I left Texas the first time. And Caitlin said, "Hey, Mom, can Jeff fly me out to Texas?" And I said, "Well, how about Jeff fly me out to Texas?" And he agreed. So that was the first time I had been back to Texas. It was shortly after my trip to Ghana. And we talked and we chatted, and he said, "Why don't you try to do this again? Why don't you make a 2-year plan and see if you can come back out to Texas?" And I agreed. Mostly because my niece is like, "Aunt Kristy, you didn't fail. You only fail if you don't try again." So for some of you guys who know my niece, Macy, that was her profound words at 15. Like, "Aunt Kristy, don't be a loser. Go back to Texas." And so here I am. I applied for one job, and it took me 8 months to secure. And I don't know how I got it, but I did. It was my job as a 911 dispatcher in Grapevine. It was the hardest job I had ever done in my entire life. It's by God's grace that I even passed probation. My mom actually stopped answering my phone calls because I would cry. And I'd be like, "This is just stupid. I can't." Whoever created the streets in Grapevine, they were drunk. Like, there's like 12 different places called Grapevine Mills. There's Grapevine Mills Parkway, Grapevine Mills Boulevard, and Grapevine Mills Boulevard North and South. It's dumb. And I'm directionally challenged. So, like, I know how to get to work and I know how to get home. So how I can help people, I don't know. It's still kind of crazy to me that I've actually been successful. And I actually was just promoted to supervisor, which is even more crazy that's even, like, they trust me enough and that's a thing. Like, crazy. So anyway, so God brought me back, and everything in my trip back was God orchestrated. Like, I wanted an apartment downstairs, and the apartment complex said, "Oh, we don't have any available." And I'm like, "Okay, well, no big deal. I don't know when I'm moving anyways." They called me back within a couple hours, and they're like, "Okay, guess what? The apartment that we thought wasn't going to be available, they just gave their notice, so it'll be available." Like, everything just worked out like it was the right thing to do. So I went into work and I gave my notice. I said, "Hey, I guess I'm leaving." And they're like, "Well, when are you starting your job?" I'm like, "I don't know. They haven't given me a date. They let me choose the start date." Like, everything was just weird. But here I am. So I moved out here February of 2018, February 24th. My brother actually drove my stuff up on February 14th and unloaded it into the apartment. I lived in Ashley Village Apartments. I myself made the trip on February 28th or 27th, and I started my new job on March 5th. And so I had 5 days to, like, do the registration and stuff. But here I am. Thinking I would be here 7 years later in the capacity that I am is just still unheard of. Shortly after I came back, I reached out to Lucas, and we sat down and we had that talk. I kind of told him my history and kind of my passion, and so we started building that relationship. I knew I could call on him. I'm super fickle when it comes to like attending church because I work till 3 o'clock in the morning a lot of nights, or I work till 7 a.m. And it was hard to get here. But he was always understanding, and he knew that it was in my heart. I got mad at the city because they wouldn't let me have a 4-foot white picket fence. So I thought, instead of blasting him on Facebook, I'm going to learn how the city government works. So I got involved in the city, and that's actually how I got wound up on council. It was truly over a 4-foot white picket fence. They said I could have a 3-foot white picket fence or a 4-foot chain link fence. I said I live in a little blue house with a pink door. I mean, a chain link fence really isn't the Hallmark movie that I live in my head. And so, and if you know me for any period of time, that's exactly how I live my life, is my Hallmark movie. But I got involved in the city, and someone's like, why don't you run for city council? I'm like, no. And they're like, no, really, you should run. I'm like, no. Join city council. It'll be fun, they said. Not always a lot of fun, but it opened a lot of doors. And so I'm actually finishing up my first 3-year term, and I'm currently mayor pro tem, and that's just crazy. It's crazy to me because where I come from, things like that just didn't happen. Like Lucas said, some of the local nonprofits, they disbanded in, I think, 2021. So Lucas reached out to me. He's like, you want to have coffee? And I'm like, no, but okay. Because every time he calls me, there's always something. Like, hey, Kristy, you want to do a testimony? No. I'm right. So we sat at Liberation, and he said, hey, what do you know about this other organization? And I'm like, I just know that they disbanded. And he's like, yeah, that's what I heard. Like, he knew. He had this whole thing planned out. And he's like, well, what do you think if we do this together? And I'm like, no, Lucas, I don't have time. I work too much. I have a ton of dogs, and I don't want to do it. He's like, okay, well, how about we do this together? And I'm like, Lucas, no. And he's like, okay, one more time. 3 is the magic number, apparently, for me, because he's like, okay, Kristy, I know you. I know that if you tell me no right now, you're going to commit to doing it by yourself. So you can either do it with me, and we'll do it together, or you're going to do it by yourself, because that's who you are. That's how it happened. And I'm like, I'll think about it. And he's like, yes, I got her. And so sure enough, that was the first year we did, we called it Heart of the Holidays. And I can walk you through CPR and I can save your life, but I don't know how to work like Google Docs or Dropbox. And he's like, you need to learn this. And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, dude, I'll be 50 this year. I don't need to learn anything. But he started sending me all these emails and Google Docs. I'm like, dang it, I got to learn this stuff. So I did, and we worked together well for the most part, I think. And we got gifts to 300 kids that year. And that's how, and he had the foundation because he's friends with all these pastors. I don't know pastors. I mean, that's crazy talk. And now I have all these pastors' phone numbers on my speed dial, and they call me with questions, or families that need help, because I've established myself as being that person and just loving the community. And that's how my nonprofit, Lake City's Hope, evolved, really. So Lucas was a big part of it, giving me the encouragement and just kind of planting the seed and the desire. So we did that, and he's like, okay. And then he went off on the wayside. And I'm like, dude, I got this. So I started a nonprofit organization called Lake City's Hope. We were an approved 501c3 as of January of 2023. And in the last 2 years, we have about 9 active programs. Is that okay if I tell this stuff now too? Okay. We have about 9 active programs that we do throughout the year. So right now is my off season for like the next 2 weeks. I have nothing to do, well, except work and testimonies and stuff. Um, sorry, I'm really not that entertaining. You guys are giving me a complex, Jason. um, and then in a couple weeks, I start my busy season. We've acquired the backpack drive. So last year was the first year we did it, but we took over the backpack drive that's hosted at Thousand Hills Church. Last year, we got backpacks and school supplies to 421 kids locally. We also do Mission Turkey, which I named that. I think it's a really cool name. It's getting turkey meal boxes to families in need. So everybody has to apply. So they have to be financially in need. The first year, we were making them do like income statements and all kinds of crazy. So this year, I don't want to be like the turkey police. So I've kind of opened it up. I've lessened the requirements. If you apply and you are active on food stamps, then you're going to be eligible for my program because I know that you hit that income level. And if you're lying to the federal government, you lie to me, I mean, whatever. My whole purpose is to help people. So last year and this year, we did meal boxes for 100 local families. And that's a really neat program because our churches come together and do it. First Baptist Church Corinth, they donated 100 turkeys. And then Thousand Hills Church donated 100 brownie mixes. And First Baptist Church Lake Dallas, you guys donated oil. We, because I'm a member too, we donated oil. And so these people, these families, they apply and they get to pick up their meal boxes. And it's not prepared food, but they get a turkey and they get stuffing and brownie mix and oil and sugar. And then we partner with the Lake Dallas ISD. And they do a canned food drive that we're ultimately responsible for. So they donated 11,000 cans of food this year. It was down a little bit. Last year they did 15,000, which is a crazy amount of food. But that food goes to the families. That food, some of it goes into my little 800 square foot house with no garage and no storage. So it's sitting in my living room right now. But I use it throughout the year because there's little food pantry boxes. I don't know if you guys are aware of them. But there's one over at the library. And there's one at Kingswood Mobile Home Park. And so I drive there during the week and I stock them with things like beans and spaghetti sauce and things like that. I did that this morning before I came here. And then the families that are local, so the ones that are living in an apartment complex or in the mobile home park, can get a little bit of relief knowing that they can shop that box for no charge. We also do Operation Christmas, which I also named, and that is the Christmas gifts. So for the families that apply for Mission Turkey, am I okay on time? Okay. Oh, that's a good point. But I know you guys want to eat. And I'm really not that interesting. But Operation Christmas, we got gifts for 331 kids last year and about 327 this year. And then I actually had 7 people apply after the fact that I also got gifts for. So just over 330 kids, which is about 112 families. But it takes a little bit of relief off. And I can't do that without the community because we do the little tags. I don't know if you guys have seen them around, but they're at all the big churches. And then they're at Lenny Bird Cupcakes, and they were at Decompressed Chiropractor, and A Time to Dance. And people pick tags, and they buy the gifts. And then we are able to gift them to the families. Every year I say I'm not going to do it again because it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. But I have a good team of people. One of my good friends, Rachel, she actually handed all the tags because, again, we're not that smart. It's like 2 old ladies trying to figure out the internet stuff. So she was like gluing the back of the tags on, and it was like crazy what we do. But we know for the 2 weeks before Christmas, our families don't matter. They do, but not really. My dogs don't matter. Like nothing else matters, and that's what we focus on. Thankfully, the city of Lake Dallas is very kind to me. I mean, I am on council. But I take over their community room. So from like December, the first part of December through Christmas, The community room is mine, or not mine, but Lake City's Hope. And we just have hundreds and hundreds of Christmas gifts. And we put them in bags, and they're all lined up. And then the families come and they pick them up. And it's the the moms that are crying, and it just makes it worth it. We also do a senior citizen luncheon. So I don't know if any of y'all attended this year. It's the third year. Funny story about that, too. The first year when me and Lucas were partnering together, I'm like, hey, Lucas, I heard that they used to do this. And he's like, don't do it, Kristy. I'm like, no, it sounds really cool. Like, they give food to senior citizens, and it's like a thing. And it used to happen for years. And then with COVID, and Lucas, come on, let's do it. He's like, no. Apparently, he doesn't have that 3-question rule, because I asked him more than 3 times, and he's like, no, Kristy, it's too much for you. Then I made the phone call to him, and I said, hey, Lucas, guess what? I'm doing a senior citizen luncheon. He's like, oh, Kristy, I told you no. But it was a hit. The first year, we had 92 senior citizens show up. It was hosted over at Bentley Station, so we kind of changed it up again. It used to be hosted at the Methodist Church with like a potluck stuff. But we did it at Bentley Station this year, which is fancy. If you don't know what they are, it's a wedding venue event center in Lake Dallas. And they donate the facility for no charge. And then I reached out to the community, and we have such a giving community. Sometimes they're not always nice, but they're giving. And we were able to do 94 senior citizens the first year. Last year we had 112, and this year we had 149 senior citizens. We did swag bags for all of them, with items donated from like CoServe and a bunch of other places. Santa Claus comes, and we have door prizes, and they dress up, and it's something they look forward to, because I will get phone calls from people I've never even met. And we have as young as 45-ish. I say, you know what, if you identify as a senior citizen, join us. I'm not going to judge them as a senior citizen police and tell you no. But up to, I think, 96 years old. And it's amazing. And this year at Corinth Rehab, they came. And it's a fun event. It's one of my favorite events all year round. So we're going to have a 4th one for any of you guys that attended this year. We'll have a 4th one in December. And then I also do monthly visits to Together We Care. I bet most of you probably don't know that there's a local adult day hub in town. They take care of 20 to 25 intellectually disabled adults during the day. And we take them lunch and do craft time and story time once a month. And it started last year as a Christmas party for them. And you walk in, you feel like a celebrity. Man, they know my name, and some of them took 3 or 4 months to get the connection built, but they look forward to it. And so that's something else that we do. We also do an adopt-a-spot cleanup. So once a month, I'm out really early in the morning at the Welcome to Lake Dallas sign, cleaning that up. We do a water drive for first responders. So once a year in May, we collect water bottles for first responders. The first year we did about 3,000 water bottles, and we donate them to Corinth PD, Hickory Creek PD, Lake Dallas PD, and the fire department and public works, because those guys are outside just as much as the actual first responders. This year we did over 5,000 bottles of water, and those are just cases of water that are dropped off at my house or at Quick Ship, or money is donated. We also have a fabulous dress closet. So I have, which is kind of on hiatus, but I'll explain it because I think it's a really cool program. We have 300 prom dresses and formal dresses that the community can borrow for no charge. So the first year we did it, it was hosted at Lakeshore Baptist Church, and we've since lost our location, so our dresses are now in storage. So if you know of anybody that needs a tax write-off, because I have no money, but has space to donate, I'm willing to talk to them. But it's fun. It started as just for prom, but it developed into so much more. So if you have a wedding to go to, or if you have a gala to go to, or if you have some special event at work to go to, you can come borrow a dress. And we have some tuxedos and some suits. And it's a really neat community thing, because there's no judgment. My whole purpose is to make the girls feel beautiful, or the women feel beautiful, and to give back to the community. And then we also have our Trade Days market. So once a week, every week, every Saturday from like April to September. We have the Lake City's Trade Days and Farmers Market. And we have a couple members that are also vendors. Miss Allie, I don't know if you've had her bath salts. But they're vendors, and they come out there, and we're currently, and it's still scheduled right now to be in the parking lot of First Baptist Church Lake Dallas. We have 20 to 22 vendors, everywhere from eggs to sourdough bread to what? Stuffies and just all kinds of stuff. Bath salts and soaps and all kinds of stuff. And what's really neat about that is that the way we set it up is the vendors pay a very small fee. If you're a returning vendor, it's normally $100 for the entire season. So it ends up being about $4 a week or $5 a week. And the money goes into the nonprofit, and that's how we pay our operating expenses for the nonprofit. So then you, as a community, can know that if you donate money to Mission Turkey or Operation Christmas during the year, all of our operating things are all paid for from the trade days that I work on. So none of your money is going to that. It's not going to the website. It's not going to the domain. It's not going to insurance. It's truly going back into the community. And then we did monthly markets this year, October, November, and December. So that will hopefully start back up in August, April. Hello. And hopefully we'll have Miss Allie back. And then in 2025, some of the programs I'm hoping to do, or 2026, is adopt a grandparent, where it's a relationship building. It's more than just taking a meal. It's actually like a year-long commitment where we have a family or a person go and visit with a local senior citizen who may not easily get out. I've kind of started the groundwork. I've taken Thanksgiving meals and Christmas meals to a couple local senior citizens that aren't able to get out. And it's kind of building that relationship. We also are going to probably do a springtime canned food drive to help offset some of the food pantries, the little free pantries and the big food pantry at the Methodist Church. I have a goal of doing quarterly lunches or lunch and learns for senior citizens. So I'm trying to get the groundwork done on that because I plan all this stuff by myself. And then this is really fun. We just started talking about maybe even having a senior citizen Valentine's Day dance or something like that. And then my goal is to get CPR trainer certified. So then I can go out to all of the local businesses in Lake Cities and offer free CPR training to all of the local businesses for free. And that's kind of like my 911 dispatcher. You got to save a life and do all that kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty much what we do in me in a nutshell. I also have an adult daughter in California. She's 27. And I have 4 dogs. Allie, you haven't met my newest dog. He only has 3 legs, too. I have a 3-legged Belgian Malinois named Tucker, and now 3 Shih Tzus because everybody needs 4 dogs. My latest one, and then I'm done. He was shot in the leg in Dallas, and he was put on the youth. They were going to euthanize him, so I rescued him, and so he's a mess. But collectively, I call him Tucker and the Shits. But I have Fig Newton. We're fat. We're a fat family. I have Fig Newton, Oreo Cookie, and Snickerdoodle, and they are my absolute pride and joy. So if you find me on Facebook, everything I post about is probably about my dogs, because that's what people know me for. Like, I'll be walking down the street, and it's like, hey, Kristy. It's like, hey, Tucker. Is that it? Oh, yeah. He said I had to pick a verse, too. Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Really, my number one rule in life is be kind. I try to live my life in a way that my grandpa would be proud of me. And so every decision I make would be truly to make grandpa proud. And for the most part, I think I'm doing okay. But everything I do, there's no reason why we can't be kind. And it doesn't, anybody can serve. I don't have money. I live in a little 800 square foot house with no garage and no storage, and with my 4 dogs. And I make it work. I tell people I live paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes I live last paycheck to last paycheck, but I'm still able to serve. And I know when I was going on mission, they said some people can go, some people can donate, and some people can pray. And so I just hope that you are able to find where you fit in. You might be a goer. I can't pay for what I do. I would go completely bankrupt, but I have the desire to be on the ground and do the footwork. And then some of my partners and my sponsors, they have no desire to do that, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the know-how, but they're able to financially give. And then, and if you guys could just all pray that Lake City's Hope, which also stands for helping other people elevate, continues to be a significant part of the community, and we continue to grow, because this is an amazing community. I hated it in 2012, but I absolutely bleed green now. This is where I intend to stay. This is where I intend to retire and live out the rest of my life, and hopefully just help make every day a little bit better, and just kind of make our little world into a Hallmark movie. Did I cover all your questions?
You got everything. You're so good.
So you have no questions?
I have no questions. Everything has been answered. Thank you, Kristy. Kristy's verse is one that I find incredibly encouraging, and as we were preparing for Kristy to share her testimony, there were two passages of Scripture that came to my mind. The first is James chapter 1, verse 22, and I'm not going to give a whole sermon here. I know we're getting ready to eat, and it's a little over time, but James chapter 1, verse 22 is one of the most simple verses in all the Scripture, and it says, "Be not just hearers of the word, but doers." And one of the most important things that we can do, and James talks about this extensively, is that when we do good works, that people are attracted to it, that they're drawn to it, they see our love for Christ and the good works that we do. There's a reason that if you were to get one of our shirts for our church, or you were to look at the 3 things that we've been focusing on heavily in 2024, it is preach the gospel, do good works, and to love one another. And the reason simply is because when we are doing good works, we are showing people that we truly believe in the Christ that we claim to serve. And it so ties in with everything that we were looking at this morning when we were talking about Moses and Aaron and Hur. That Aaron and Hur didn't have to be asked to go and to lift Moses' arms. Moses' arms were up, and they noticed that the Israelites were triumphant, that they were winning whenever that was happening. And as Moses' arms began to fall, Aaron and Hur did not have a discussion over in the corner. They didn't need somebody's permission. They didn't stop and pray and say, you know what, I wonder if this is something we should go do. Instead, they saw a need, and they ran over. And as they began to serve Moses, like we talked about in the kids' corner, the entirety of the kingdom of Israel was victorious because of the service of 2 men. What we have to understand is that when we look at our community, when we look at our state, when we look at our country, and all of the changes and things that we might think need to be made for one reason or another, what actually makes the difference is if God's people are doing what we're called to do. When we are not just reading the word because it's encouraging or because it's uplifting to us, but when we become doers of the word, when we encourage one another to good works. Kristy talked about all the different ways that we could be a part of what she's doing at Lake City's Hope. She talked about the involvement of our church and being there on the ground level. And so I wanted her to share her testimony for a couple of reasons. One is to encourage you with the things that are happening. And the second is so that you know that as incredible as Kristy is, she said herself that there's nothing really that she sees as special. There's no incredible skill other than she knows how to love people. That's the thing that we're called to do more than anything else as believers. That if we simply just stopped and loved our neighbor, if we simply just stopped and cared for the people that were around us, then we might see that the God who was able to save the Israelites is also able to bring revival and restoration and redemption to our community. This is the other passage that came to mind. It's from Galatians chapter 5. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The law is not against such things. Now those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. That if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another to envy. Instead, we should provoke one another to the love of Christ and to good works. And so that is my challenge to you as we end this year. Whether it's by getting involved with Lake City's Hope, whether it's by serving at our church, whether it's just by seeing the needs that are around us. If we want to see 2025 be a year of restoration, of redemption, and revival in our community, it starts with the men and women of God stepping out and serving. With us loving others by preaching the gospel, doing good works, and loving them. We're going to skip our hymn of invitation. We're going to go straight to lunch today, but I want us to consider what it is as we pray together and wrap up. What it is that God would have you do. Maybe we get a wake-up call at 3 in the morning like Kristy did, but there are other times like Aaron and her where we're just going to see that there's a need that needs to be filled. And instead of asking the question, why me, like we do to God so many times, why not you? Let's take on the motivation of Isaiah. Here I am, Lord, send me.